Now, as we're about to kick off, get comfortable, stretch, grab some tea, and we are going to get into this topic. But before we do, let's introduce our speakers for today. So, our first panelist is a longtime neuroscience junkie. He pursued this interest at the University of Buffalo, where he earned his master's in neuroscience, as well as completed his Ph.D. in cognitive psychology at Syracuse University. Now, as a team member at NLI, his work focuses on interpreting and translating scientific research into actionable insights for organizations. He uses his expertise in cognitive psychology, specifically in human memory and decision-making, and advanced computational analysis to advise, inform, and support the creation of our scalable solutions. Please welcome researcher here at NLI, Dr. Ryan Curl. Ryan, great to have you.
Thank you, Shelby. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited for the conversation we're going to have today. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Our next guest is the founder and president of the Cloud Institute for Sustainability Education in New York City. The Cloud Institute is dedicated to the vital role of education in creating awareness, fostering commitment, and guiding actions towards a healthy, secure, and sustainable future for ourselves and for future generations. A pioneer in the field of education for sustainability, she is an international keynote speaker, thought leader, and educational consultant. She writes and publishes extensively while serving as a leadership advisor and curriculum development coach to administrators, educators in school districts, governments and civic organizations, and corporations around the world. Please join me in welcoming the founder and president of the Cloud Institute for Sustainability Education, Jaimie Cloud. Jaimie, it's so great to have you here today.
Thanks, Shelby. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. And our leader for today's discussion, an Aussie turned New Yorker who coined the term NeuroLeadership when he co-founded NLI over 2 decades ago. With a professional doctorate, 4 successful books under his name, and a multitude of bylines ranging from the Harvard Business Review, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and many more, a warm welcome as I pass the virtual mic to co-founder and CEO of the NeuroLeadership Institute, Dr. David Rock. Off to you, David.
Thanks so much, Shelby. Thanks for the warm welcome. It's great to be here with you. Great to be here with everyone. And Jaimie, great to have you back. I know we had a lot of fun talking about your work at the summit, and we had a really powerful session, I think, at the event that we're going to get a chance to dig a lot more into. So welcome back, Jaimie. Before we get in, and I'll share slides in a moment. Tell me a little bit about Earth Day. What's the history of it, and happy Earth Day.
Yeah, happy Earth Day to you and to everybody listening. Earth Day was actually created because in the 60s, many environmental disasters were happening. Silent Spring had just been written. The Cuyahoga River was on fire. Oil spills everywhere. And so in 1970, Gaylord Nelson, a junior senator from Wisconsin, decided that this was the day to celebrate the earth and to celebrate our right and our responsibility to a healthy environment. So that's what we're celebrating.
Amazing. It's I didn't know the history of it. We have a Mother's Day, we have a Father's Day. I think they put in a Secretary's Day at some point, but I was never clear on Earth Day. That's quite interesting. I'm just going to share screen for a moment. If we can get something's kind of...
Yeah, for me, every day is Earth Day and Mother's Day, especially.
Right, absolutely. Give me a moment to share screen. Tell me about how we're doing. So if you were to give, Earth Day a kind of a rating, how are we doing? Give us a sense of that.
Well, not as well as we could be doing. We are kind of headed in the opposite direction that we actually want to be headed if we want to thrive over time and build that capability to thrive over time as humans. I think you have a little slide we're going to share. This is a great indicator. This is a chart, and for those of you who are just listening to us on audio, we have a chart in front of us of the last 50, 60 years, and it shows that the GDP, with the gross domestic product, the total amount of economic activity globally, just keeps steadily going up and up and up, and that there's an inverse correlation between that index and the genuine progress indicator, which includes environmental health, social health, educational attainment, all the things that when you ask somebody what are the top 3 things that make their lives worth living, all of those show up in the genuine progress indicator. And so while economic activity is going up steadily, all the other quality of life indicators are going in the opposite direction.
Wow.
And it's pretty astounding.
So if you're a time traveler trying to go back to the best time in human history, you'd go back to about 1977 is what this is saying. And everything's been kind of downhill since the late 70s.
Right. Well, right. Why have an economy if it doesn't contribute to your quality of life? There's no point in that.
And tell me a bit more about that indicator so everyone understands, like what kinds of things are in that and how's it calculated?
Yeah, so it's all done in dollar value. So it's the what they call the substitution value of healthy children, for example,
Right.
well-educated people, happiness. There's a lot of work being done on the happiness index. And so some indicators of happiness and well-being are in there. Recreation, physical health, all the things that help us get up in the morning.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. I mean, if for those that are listening and not seeing the, late 70s, it kind of peaks and then it goes, down a bit, then up a little, and then down, and then up a little, and down, sort of like the worm in some political thing, but it's trending down very clearly since that time, whereas the GDP's, clearly trending up pretty steadily.
Exactly. And if you look at, I have some other charts with a lot of the different quality of life indicators, the gap between rich and poor and human health, human development, and they all, as that GDP keeps steadily going up, they're all going wacky up and down and all around. And again, they can go up together. They should go up together, but that's not what they're doing at the moment. And of course, environmental health is a part of that as well.
Yeah. So happy Earth Day, and Earth says we need to do better. That's the cliff note.
And we can do better.
We can do better. We're trending down at the moment. We should do better, and we can do better. We'll talk in a minute about kind of the right and wrong way to mobilize people to do better, because I think clearly what we've been doing hasn't worked. We'll come to that in a minute. But I want to, speaking of history, I want to go back to a little history of our own at the Institute. And you were at the summit this year. It was actually a 15-year anniversary of the first summit in Asolo in northern Italy. And here you are in 2007. This was the very first summit that we ran in partnership with a university called Chimba. Dr. Al Ringleb there and I collaborated for many years. And you can see the square on the top right. It's kind of all the participants there. We had some fascinating individuals coming along, as well as yourself. We had a physicist. We had Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz, who's an amazing scientist. And on the bottom right there, you're talking with Robert Coghill, who did some research that I still quote all the time, showing that essentially there is no such thing as a pain response. It all depends on your expectations, and the right dose of expectations is equal to a clinically active dose of morphine. It's a factual statement that playing with expectations literally alters the pain response. And it was such an interesting kind of body of research. I remember unpacking that. You can see the audience. So happy 15th year. We're glad to have you back. And you continue to be passionate about things that organizations are starting to kind of have to pay attention to. I think they're being forced a little bit from upward pressure from employees who are saying, if you want me to work here, I need to see that you're aligned with my values. Obviously it's an incredibly difficult time to hire people, and people are voting with their feet more than ever based on company values. So I think there's some really interesting upward pressure, and there's also increasing downward pressure. It's been a record year for investment in, what you might think of as ethical investment or sustainable investment. So from the investment community, it's been a huge breakout year in the last couple of years, really, around that. So we're seeing, upward and downward pressure, and it's almost like 20 years later, finally, people are paying attention to things that you've been talking about for a very long time. So tell us a little bit about your institute, the Cloud Institute. Kind of what do you do, and give us the sort of minute or two version of that would be helpful for context for people.
So we focus mostly on school systems because that's where all the children and young people are legally required to be. during their most favorable time for learning. And we want at schools to actually educate for a healthy, sustainable, and regenerative future. And in fact, all systems are perfectly designed to get the results they get. And this current situation of unsustainability is not the work of ignorant people. It's the work of extremely well-educated people, many of whom have advanced degrees. So we would argue that it is not a lack of education, but the education itself that has unintentionally given us the mindsets for an unsustainable future. And so we want to change that because all the children are there. And we think that young people are the secret sauce to making the shift toward a sustainable and regenerative education. So that turns into professional learning, curriculum design, leadership development, organizational change, and creating partnerships with the communities in which the schools and districts reside, because schools and communities learning and working together for the future we want is our unit of change.
So you're teaching teachers to teach kids about sustainable practices and changing mindsets. How many teachers have you taught in your career so far? What's your best guess?
Oh, over 200,000 at the moment.
Wow.
Globally, we work globally, and now with the virtual access, you can access even more people. But for every one teacher, you get in public schools, you get 150 kids a day. So that's a lot of young people.
200,000 teachers. Well, thank you for the important work that you're doing out there that is, finally starting to get recognized. So I appreciate your hard work out there. Let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about a framework that we started discussing in the last few years. And, at NLI, we have this habit of kind of noticing something interesting and kind of doing a little bit of work on it and then maybe presenting at a summit and then coming back and more research. And, we take time with things. We just released work on empathy that was over 3 years research. And this is something we've been talking about for more than 2 years internally. And it actually came from one conversation at the time with Dean Carter, who's the head of people at Patagonia. And he was telling us about kind of this whole way that they were thinking about everything at Patagonia. We did an interview with him, we did a podcast with him, and it just hugely got my attention as because this concept just changes your schemas in such a profound way. You kind of, it literally changes how you see the world in relation to not just your people practices. In fact, we're making the leap to people practices. It really changes how you see the world in every way, but it kind of needs to be applied to people practices. And the concept is very simple, is that as humans, in dealing with any kind of system, whether it's a company or a farm or a city or a building or a mine or any kind of complex system, there are 4 ways that we can conceptualize how we interact with that. One of those is to essentially exploit the system, and exploitive means you basically don't care about the impact you have. You're just trying to get everything possible out of it, right? And there are still some countries that have exploitative practices to do with mining or agriculture, and people get killed and it's awful, right? So exploitative is you don't care at all. A lot of industry has and sort of systems overall land at the next one up, which is depletive, which is sort of the really bad things have been regulated out. You can't harm people anymore, but essentially whatever system you're interacting with is worse off every year. Whether it's a mine and every year it's sort of more degraded, or a farm, every year the soil is worse. So you're not exploiting it, but you're depleting it. And most of our systems are in that place, including a lot of talent systems, people systems, HR systems. It's like, human resources versus, something else. So the next one up is where a lot of people kind of land, which is sustainable practices, right? And it makes a lot of sense. It's really helpful to go from depletive to sustainable. Sustainable means, neutralizing. And you're neutralizing the impacts. But there's something further than that. And this is kind of what Dean got us really excited by. And of course, you've been talking about this for decades, and others have been talking about it for decades. But at NLI, we got excited about it. And it's this concept of regenerative practices. And if you sort of take it to, say, a farm, right? Exploitative is just, to get everything you can out. Depletive gets worse every year. Sustainable is you kind of neutralize the effect of farming. But regenerative is every year the farm actually produces a little bit more because it's a little bit healthier. Like the soil is healthier, the overall biome is healthier, your employees are healthier, your finance, it doesn't have to be a huge amount because that wouldn't be sustainable, but you're literally leaving the system better than you found it every year, right? And obviously, hockey stick growth doesn't allow that. It might be more steady growth, but it's a long-term regenerative approach. And what's interesting is a lot of natural systems work that way. A lot of natural systems actually mimic that. The system constantly gets more biodiverse until something comes along. So exploitative, depletive, sustainable, regenerative. Just on the concept, Jaimie, I'd love to hear from you, Ryan, as well. Just kind of fill in the gaps a bit. Tell us a little bit more about the concept, and I'll put some visuals up as well. But yeah, Jaimie, what do you want to add there?
Well, I was just going to say, I think the thing that people don't realize is that reciprocity is not optional. Whatever you do and whatever you don't do will make a difference, and it will have one of those 4 outcomes. And so if you're on the left side there in the exploitative and the depletive mode, there will be unintended consequences that will come back to bite you. And if you're moving toward a sustainable and a regenerative future, there will also be feedback and intended and unintended consequences that will come back to support you. And so for our own good, moving to sustainability and regeneration makes the only sense because of that feedback. And the thing that I've learned from the brain science is sometimes you cannot read the feedback. You can't, if your mental model or the mental map that you're operating with prevents you from seeing the results of your actions. And so you can't take responsibility for those results. And I think that's, and I'm gonna let Ryan take it from there, but that is one of the key things that the brain science has done to help us in educating for this kind of thing.
Thanks, Jaimie. Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, I think one key point, and to tie this framework into the conversation we had about GDP versus GPI, is that we need to be using the right metrics so that we can identify where we are. If you have the wrong impression of GDP, for example, you might be convinced that you're regenerative or sustainable when maybe that's not the case. So I think it's also important to consider, how we're measuring these things as well.
Right, because the GDP measures the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's just total amount of activity. It has nothing to do with quality of life.
Right, and I read just recently about GDP. If you produce and pollute the environment, GDP increases from the production, but it also increases from the cleaning up of that. Right, so the more mess you make, if you're cleaning it up, your GDP raises. So it is a really biased measure in that way.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a little story. This kind of anchors on for me. Last August, I finally took a vacation, tried to travel somewhere, of course, immediately caught COVID and was kind of stuck somewhere. It wasn't anywhere awful, it was somewhere nice, except that I couldn't do anything. I had quite a bad hit of it, even though I was vaccinated. But I was like, I can't watch TV, I can't really rest, I sort of couldn't do anything, couldn't go outside, obviously. And the one thing I discovered I could do was actually read. And anytime I go anywhere, I always take books in this distant hope that I'll actually read. But on this trip, I discovered I could actually read. It was the only thing I could do for maybe a couple of hours a day, tops. And I started reading a book I'd been carrying around for over a year, dying to kind of read. And it was called 1,000 Brains by Jeff Hawkins, who wrote a book called On Intelligence. And he actually designed the Palm Pilot and kind of sold that whole business, basically so he could get into neuroscience research. And he set up a whole neuroscience research institute, really hardcore research. And his mission has been to understand the cortex, which is the more kind of human or more conscious processing part of the brain, the whole cortex, all of the outer region is the cortex. And he actually developed a theory, and it's in this book called 1,000 Brains, and it blew my brain away. And the core message of it is everything is about schemas. Everything is about a map, and every single bit of information is held in a complex schema. And you can't study neurons, you can't study the cortex without actually a theory of the schemas. And for me, there's this unconscious schema that we have, right, going into, a talent review meeting, which might be, a depletive one that you don't even know you have, right? But it's unconsciously kind of orienting all your thinking, all your decision making, all this stuff. And I think what this framework does potentially is it gets people to kind of be metacognitive and say, okay, which schema do we need, particularly around people? Now, this whole framework is obviously incredibly relevant to the environment, to the built environment, to the way we run companies, to supply chain, what's left of it, to all of that. But we think it's also really relevant to how you manage and develop people. And at NLI just this week, I made a big push internally to say, hey, we're really going to do some significant experiments on ourselves at a couple hundred people to understand regenerative practices more. We really want to try a lot of things. And I think that the more regenerative you are, the more everyone starts to apply those principles around them as well. So I think there's a real opportunity. But let's kind of dig into what it is a little bit. But before we do that, I guess I want to pick your brains, Jaimie, because when I think about Earth Day, when I think about even talking about Earth Day, the first thing that I imagine visually is people rolling their eyes saying, I don't want to hear more about the environment. So you've been trying to get people to care, to make this kind of thing a priority for over, close to 30 years, I understand. You've been trying to get people to care. For all of those out there that are trying to get their company to care more about ESG, it's called now, or other, or regenerative practices, whatever it is. For all those people trying to get their CEO to care, tell us the things they shouldn't do and some of the things that they should do to make this a priority. And then we'll talk a little bit about the habits that we researched and came up with over the last year or so as well. So what should people do and not do around this?
In my experience, people associate the word sustainability or earth or the environment with bad news. So right away, you're going to put people in the away state if that's their association they're making. And so what I do, number one, is to figure out, what is it you love? What do you care about? What do you want for your future, for your children's future, your company's future? And then I look to see how we can connect the dots between what they love and what we're calling sustainability and regeneration, because people don't know what they don't know. And so we're teaching about something that even we don't know how to do. So that's a really interesting challenge. And so if you help people to say, well, look, what we can probably agree on is we want a healthy future. So how are we going to get from here to there? The thing, again, back to your notion about schema, people don't realize, they assume it's somebody else causing this unsustainability. Once they understand what it is, they have a very difficult time taking responsibility for the difference they make. Only 29% of the people that I've worked with over many, many years that I've surveyed say that it's the environment that's the entry point to sustainability and regeneration. It's because of the environment. The other 71% have different entry points, and we need to know what those entry points are. Health is a big one. The business case is a huge one. The biggest one is the ethical and moral responsibility to future generations. For some reason, people don't connect the dots between what we're doing, shooting ourselves in the foot and future generations in the foot. They don't connect those dots. They never understood that I meet a lot of educational leaders that didn't realize that humans were actually dependent on the living systems for our lives. They don't understand that environmental health is human health. They don't understand the interdependence. And so helping people understand that we're interdependent on one another, that people are interdependent on one another and on the living systems upon which all life and all production depends. That is not a well understood concept, strangely. And these people have PhDs. And so that's why I say, they obviously didn't learn it in school, and they didn't pick it up anywhere else. And so they need to be able to connect the dots. And so you don't want to associate any of these terms with bad news. You want to associate it with the future we want, with happiness, with health, with well-being, with making more money, with all of the things we like to do, with having fun, with good food. That shifts people, because that's what they really want.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that I know we associated with was being able to adapt quickly. The theme of our summit last year was, this year was adapt faster. And I think a system that's really regenerative can deal with external stresses like a storm or a fire, if it's if it's land, and actually recover faster, and it can adapt faster to changes because the system's communicating, internally really richly. It's reading feedback really quickly. So I think more regenerative practices means greater resilience, both physical and human resilience.
Right. It's even better than resilience, because what you're describing is resilience. Regeneration is leaving the place better than you found it. Resilience is always a good idea because stuff happens, right? But it's not necessarily an aspiration. Regeneration is the aspiration. And figuring out what our unique contribution is as humans is another thing that really works for people. Because we're teaching about something and learning about something we don't know how to do, we actually need everyone's participation. Everyone has a unique contribution to make, a niche, if you will. And so we want to make sure they understand what is yours, what's your contribution, and make it. My graduate students, when they finally realize it's game on and not game over, they say, well, what can we do? And they're all design students. And I say, well, you're designers, design something, do you? What is it you do? So whatever it is people do, they have a contribution to make, and they can start making it.
Right. Just go do something. Everyone go do something is a good start.
Because you're having an effect one way or the other, whether you're doing something or not doing something, it has an effect. You're
having an effect either way. Erica asked an interesting question earlier, how do you change people's schemas? This is an age-old question. And the way not to do it is to become like a passionate evangelist, which is ironic, because the more you sort of want people to change, the more they sense that you're saying that there's something wrong with how they see the world. They get a status attack, right?
Right.
The more they feel you trying to change them, they have an autonomy response. They control them, right? So the more kind of you try passionately to advocate for this, in some ways, the more people pull back. The more you make it bad news, the more people kind of shut down, become, there's all these sort of traps to activating this. And what you're saying is you've got to kind of connect to things people already care about. And then how do you activate this? For me, it's I mean, this is a central human question people ask all the time. It's a lot of it's in stories that people kind of don't see coming. They don't see the insight coming. You're not talking to them about it, say environmental context, it's sort of coming tangentially and through a story, and then, they see the schema. Because it's really easy to sort of shut out. As soon as we decide someone's in our out group and has competing goals to us, we just hardly process anything they're saying. So we sort of have to stay on the same side of the table as people, stay in their in-group, and then kind of gently share stories that help people see all these different schemas, and they kind of decide for themselves. But let's dig into that. We're sort of starting to get into what are the habits. And we'll dig into this, and we'll hear from Ryan a bit more as well. So firstly, we want to say that to help a company become more regenerative, and that's what we're here to talk about for the next half hour, to help a company become more regenerative, there is a bit of a foundation that's necessary. And this is work we've been doing for a long time. Organizational growth mindsets work we've been doing for over a decade. Diversity, equity, inclusion over 7 years. Speaking up has been the last few years. Some of you saw the incredible project that's happened at Boeing around speaking up. That's really worth checking out. Maybe my team can put that webinar in the link. But these three things are really important, because trying to get people to be regenerative that have a fixed mindset, which is the opposite of a growth mindset, obviously is very, very difficult. You want people to be, open-minded is the simplest way to describe it.
Lifelong
open to
learners.
be wrong. Yeah, lifelong learners. Interested in experimenting and trying things. Open to being wrong. All of that. You also have to have everyone on board. You can't have these divisions in companies. You need the sense of inclusion, in particular, where everyone feels that they're part of a bigger mission and is pulling together around shared goals. So you also need obviously really diverse perspectives to come at these challenges, right? And then you need people to speak up.
Can I just interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
When you say you want them to feel like they're a part of it, it's more than a feeling. They are completely interdependent on one another. So they are a part of it, whether they perceive it or not. That's the thing that we want them to understand.
Let's dig into it. So these are kind of the foundations. And then we spend a lot of time with Jaimie and other experts and our own scientists trying to work out, like, so if you were to actually teach this to people and break it into kind of habits one at a time, which we love to do, we think that change requires, making something important a priority, right? Then building real habits one at a time, the way habits get built, and then putting in systems that support it all. That's our approach, PHS. So what are the habits? So we came up with 3. We introduced these at the summit. I want to go a little bit deeper into them. The first one we've been kind of talking about, but I'll explain this a little bit, and maybe Ryan can add in. And then maybe Jaimie, you can comment kind of as we look at all 3 a bit more as well. So the first one is expand your perspective, and you can kind of hear this in the conversations we've been having, but it's actually quite specific. It's expand your perspective like over time. So one of the things that like Dean from Patagonia said is that in order to be regenerative, they're thinking across decades to see the impact of things. Like they invested in a school next door to their head office, even though it was really expensive and a huge investment, because they realized that over time they were losing so many parents that would just be out all the time, dealing with their kids, and how much more supportive and empowering would it be if there was a school kind of right there for the parents. But it took them thinking over decades to see the value of that. And now they have like 2 or 3 generations of people who've literally gone to the school and now come to work there. So you got to expand over time. So you're not just thinking about this quarter or even this year. You're thinking a lot further out. You're also thinking over a lot more distance, and also including a lot of other points of view. So that's not just other people's point of view, but you're now thinking about the system, right? So you're thinking about all the different kinds of inputs. Now, the trouble with that, to expand your perspective, is you have to have a lot of working memory. You have to be able to hold a lot. And the information has to be coming to you in a way that you don't feel threatened as well, because as soon as you feel threatened, all of that reduces, right? So to see all these other perspectives and to see over time and to see more distance, these are subtle connections, and threat will really reduce that. But then there's another part of this, is that the biases that we always have will really get in the way as well. And maybe Ryan, I'll go to you to kind of bring this alive a bit more, but there are a whole bunch of biases also that really get in the way as we're trying to expand our perspectives. Ryan, do you want to talk us through that a bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. And so I'd love to go back to this idea of our schemas or our mental models and how those relate to our biases. So, you have this, a mental model is never going to be a perfect representation of your understanding of the world, right? It's the simplified view that allows you to act in the world in a way that's straightforward. And it goes to David's point of, working memory capacity. We can only hold so much information and act on so much information. But we try to make those mental models as close to an accurate representation of what we believe the objective reality to be. And we want to minimize the distance between those 2 things. And so here's where the tricky part is, and I think this is where biases come in, is that there's 2 ways to kind of minimize that distance. You can extract more information unbiased about the actual world and adjust your mental model to fit that, or you can bias the sorts of information about objective reality that you choose to consider, right? And that's where our biases come into play. So you might say, for example, a very common bias, and here's to another point to make this more palatable, is to understand that we're all susceptible to these things. So we might seek out, information that conforms to, that confirms what we already believe, right? And so it's not that we're necessarily creating a worldview that's inaccurate, but it's biased. We're picking certain bits of information at the expense of others, and this is resulting in a maladaptive mental model that we use to function in the world, right? So to realize those things, then we can take the step to kind of unbiasing the way in which we sample from reality, to then change our mental model to fit, what would end up hopefully being a regenerative business practice or otherwise.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan.
And that takes less energy, right, Ryan? That's why it's so easy to just go with the bias. It's more work to think.
Yeah, that's correct. Right. These biases play off of each other, right? We'll start picking bias samples of information. Oh, I'm finding, information from people who are more similar to me, or that I continue to go back to over and over again. So the information never changes, it never updates, right? So it's easy to get locked into that. I mean, that's a habit in its own right too, right? We can get locked into the habit of extracting information from the same biased sources as well.
Yeah, I think the distance bias is the one that sort of takes the least cognitive load to understand here. And essentially distance bias, it's one of the biases in the SEEDS model, so the D and SEEDS. So distance bias is essentially the way you have a network in the brain for detecting how close something is to you. And based on that, it determines its importance, right? So distance bias is like something that's close to you physically is much, much more important than something that's like a mile away, right? Never mind 10 miles away or across the country. Like, so something across the country, let's say a pandemic in China in February 2020, yeah, it's nothing that's in China, right? That's a distance bias, right? So it's
or where your waste goes, or
Right.
your effect on global warming and climate
Right.
change. Anytime the feedback's removed in time and space and not casually observable, it's very difficult to
It's interesting. It's time. So something tomorrow just doesn't matter to us compared to something today, and something in like 10 years is just, we massively discount its importance to us compared to something now, right? Something, so it's time, it's distance, it's also ownership. So if something's not yours, we discount it, where if it's something you're directly connected to. And so that's probably one of the easiest ones to understand. And what we've got to do to mitigate that is evaluate outcomes and resources as if they were all, here and now. And it reduces that bias, because we literally just kind of don't care intuitively about things that are far away and distant, even though they might be incredibly important to actually care about. And it's just literally a distance bias to mitigate.
Right. And in the context of interdependence, you have to care about everything that's happening, because it's coming back to you sooner or later, or to your children and grandchildren. So you can see everything you two just said explains everything about how we could have gotten this far down the road of unsustainability without really even noticing it.
Right.
And some people still don't perceive it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a distance bias. Just doesn't look important. Right. That's an easy one to understand. Expedience bias is just kind of laziness. It's just doing the surface thinking and just not thinking deeply. So you're not actually thinking about the whole system, right? Because it takes a lot of work to think about the whole system. You're just seeing like the first click down of your effect. I don't seem to have an effect when I, do this every day. So it's fine. And then the similarity and experience bias is there's a whole lot to say there. But this first habit, expand your perspective, this becomes a habit that you can actually teach people. And this is why we chose it. We only choose habits we can teach. So we believe there's a way to systematically at scale teach people to expand their perspective. And the way to do that is not make them anxious about the environment, but to actually teach them about distance bias, for example, and get people practicing mitigating distance bias, right? Get them practicing that with some safe situations, so that this becomes a habit, right? Now you're expanding your perspective, or noticing when you have a threat reaction to an issue and how you need to shift that to a reward response so that you've got more resources. So we think there are specific ways to teach this. And that's our goal, is to actually develop an approach so that we can help millions of people develop better schemas around this. And for context, last year we directly worked with about 5 million people managers globally. So, and that's starting to scale and really accelerate. So, we hope to be able to teach millions and millions of people managers how to expand their perspective in the next few years. With a lot of hard work ahead of us. But so we're working on these habits. So I appreciate any feedback or input from people on sort of, have we got these habits right and all this. But number one is expand your perspective. Number two gets a little harder, and this is challenge your thinking. And a lot of this goes back to Erica's questions before about sort of how do you change people's schemas. I don't know if you remember the movie Inception. Really amazing movie. If you ever really can't sleep, it's a great movie to put you to sleep, because it's so complicated. It's all about dreams, and you lose the plot and you drift off to sleep, which is ironic because it's sort of what the movie's about in some ways. But what the movie's really about is the power of someone thinking an idea is their own. And this team of people in this movie construct kind of invent this way to plant an idea in someone's dream such that they think it's their own. And it's such a central concept for driving any kind of big change is you need this moment. Now, we've always called it a moment of insight. It comes in many different names, the same concept, but it's essentially, it's a shifting of schemas where you see the world differently. And so we need to get better at this moment at scale. We need to teach managers to teach their people how to have these complete changes in mindsets. And it's quite a tricky thing. Jaimie, do you want to comment on that? And then Ryan, any thoughts as well?
Yeah, I think that, if people just understand that their thinking drives behavior and behavior causes results, and that they should keep their eye on those results, see if they're what they intended. And then if not, circle back and say, okay, I need to change my thinking. Danella Meadows, who used to run the Sustainability Institute in Vermont, she wrote a piece called The 12 Places to Intervene in a System, and all the different places to make change in a complex system. And she said the most two upstream places were metacognition, thinking about your thinking, and then thinking itself. That those were the two places to intervene if you want systemic change. And you can understand, because if thinking drives behavior and behavior causes results, if you don't like the results, the quickest way to make change is to change your thinking. But that requires that people attribute the results to something they did or didn't do, and to a way of thinking that they have or don't have. And that's the tricky part.
Yeah. So you've got to, start with, literally open up your mind, and then be open to challenging yourself for kind of how you see the world.
Right. And take responsibility for the difference you make.
Yeah. And
whether you intended it or not.
Right. Well, that's part of challenging thinking. I think, to someone's point in the chat, that, doing that at a time where our locus of focus has shrunk because of COVID and, now other challenges in the world, like our ability to think longer term and over more distance has actually kind of shrunk a bit. So we need to push back against that. I know there were times in the last 2 years, I could think a week ahead at the most. I'm sure many of you had that. And then, it's been delightful lately to be able to plan a month ahead. And then a great reminder that none of those plans have ever worked. Every time I plan a month ahead for the last 6 months, nothing has actually worked. So really right now we're a few weeks ahead, or in my world, I can plan a few weeks ahead at the most. I think, how do you challenge people's thinking, or get folks to be open to challenging their thinking when, this world is going on? Habit 1 is sort of a setup to it, and habit 2 is the real work. Ryan, can we hear from you a little more on this habit as well?
Yeah, so it reminds me, as we talked about in habit 1, that we're kind of wired towards these biases to some degree, and it might take some executive control to overcome these things, but we're also wired to, to continue doing the things we're rewarded for. So once we break through this one barrier, we can rely on our wiring to continue along these more adaptive habits as well, right? To challenge our thinking and to realize, the gains we make from these insights as well. I think that's really a valuable tool too. So, you break through that wall, and the same wiring that we broke through at one point, I think helps us, get to where we want to be. So we're not pushing back against our nature, I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
And Ryan, a question for you, how is this one expand your perspective different to challenge your thinking? I mean, there's some similarities obviously, but how do you see these as different? You worked on this team putting these together. Tell us more about kind of the difference.
Yeah, so I think once when you expand your perspective, you're setting in, and I think the best way to do that, or one of the best ways, is to come up with protocols that allow you to access diverse perspectives, right? So that you're actually become aware of them. But the next step there, so now you have all of these, partially connected or maybe unconnected ideas where you need to see what insights come from that, right? So that's really challenge your thinking, is like, how can I connect these ideas? What comes out of this? What's the product here? What ideas aren't leading us on the right path? What's leading us to this maladaptive mental model that I'm over valuing certain bits of information, like, temporary bottom line, short term over the long term, right? What do I need to get rid of? To then challenge my thinking and to move on to this regenerative.
Okay, let's move on. Just speaking of timing, I want to move on to the third one, and then we can kind of talk about them all. Jaimie, give us a sec. We'll kind of bring this one together, and then we'll have time to chat more and take some questions. So this third habit, if you're starting with kind of opening up and then having insights, and then this third one's really important. And I think, Jaimie, you've been kind of wanting to bring this one forward in your conversation, that you then have to commit to action. And bear in mind, these are habits. Just to remind you, there's a context. These are habits that we think are teachable and scalable around regenerative practices. So the context is regenerative practices, but once you kind of open your mind and then challenge your thinking, then you actually got to commit to action. And here we come back to our if-then plans, which is just a simple tactical way of radically increasing the likelihood of action. We know it's 200 to 400% more likely if people actually do this. So let me put the model up, then we can have a conversation about it. Mm-hmm. Expand your perspective, challenge your thinking, commit to action. Jaimie, what do you see as you see this fresh, a couple of months later? What are your perspectives?
Yeah, so just a couple of quick things. One, on the challenge your thinking, I think one thing in school, they help develop the fixed mindset. So that's a problem. So if we want growth mindset, we need to not attach our identity, our status, and our money to the frame we're operating, but rather attach those things to our ability to learn and to shift our frames. Because if we do it that way, then lifelong learning becomes the cool thing to do, not to be stuck in your frame and hang on to it. And then in terms of committing to action, it's action, yes, but everything we do and everything we don't do already makes a difference. So we're acting all the time. So it's committing to be intentional about the actions we take, and then read the feedback to see how close or far we are from our intention, and then take responsibility for that and self-correct. So it's a whole feedback loop that we're asking people to do, is to take responsibility for the difference you make, because they're already acting. And so the idea is really to be intentional about what they're doing, and is it getting us the results that we want for future generations, or even for our own company.
I mean, it reminds me a bit of the big movement of thinking that happened in the DEI space the last couple of years, that if you're not actively addressing and systemic issues of inequity and racism, then you're perpetuating them. You've got to actually be anti-racist, I think was the concept. So it's similar, these systems of these depletive systems are everywhere, and you're either supporting and enabling those depletive systems, or you're being some type of change. And I think the difficult thing is getting people to see that, even a small step that they make is valuable. Because I think people get into the mindset of like, it's hopeless, what can I do? Or, or science might save this and fix it. I don't really need to do anything.
And that's where storytelling comes in handy, because you, I think, have taught me that you can't just unwire, but you can rewire to something better. So if you have the bummer mental model where things are just the way they are and there's nothing we can do about it, the opposite, or the antidote to that, is it's possible. Best strategy to get somebody from it's not possible to it is possible: storytelling. Very friendly, very non-threatening, because if you tell somebody 3 stories of where it's already happening, it creates that cognitive dissonance, and they can't be both.
Nice. Yeah, I kind of picture, I was having an image in the last minute of like 1,000 stories of small changes, like 1,000 small changes, right? Of 1,000 different people who are doing something in their power that actually has a really positive effect.
Huge effect. Small changes for the greatest effect.
1,000 small changes, and be able to see those stories, be able to see them by category and see those stories, so we can really kind of see the stories and get engaged and involved in those. Because the way positive change happens is we tend to see it, as opposed to be talked into it. Ryan, what do you want to say there?
I just wanted to talk a little bit more about commit to action. I think we could give an entire solution based on really how to do that properly. There's so much there. Like the if-then plan, is such an incredibly useful tool, and I think it comes off at first glance as this sort of fair enough, easy to use, let's do it. But there's so much complexity there. We talk about what situations in our environment, what ifs result in what thens, but that's not just behavior. That's emotional responses, right? That's mentality. If we go back to a growth mindset for a bit, you might want to learn from others, for example, as a key useful target. But at first, you might need to, acknowledge when when you acknowledge that someone else is really good at something, you might need to have an if-then plan to kind of break down envy and turn it into admiration that you can learn from, right? So you might need to switch your mindset before you even switch your behavior, and you can use if-then plans to do that. And that's why I love this graphic, how they're all connected, because the if-then plans can help you to expand your perspective, can help you to change your thinking,
exactly,
and help you act as well. I mean, I think that's critical.
They're iterative.
That way.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So folks on the line, we've got a few minutes for questions. We'll wrap up in about 5 minutes, just under. So any other questions coming in the chat, you can put them in either in the Q&A or the chat. We'll take a look at those and see kind of what we want to dig into. But the hypothesis we have is that there is a way to shift people to more regenerative practices. And part of it, obviously, is the amazing work Jaimie's doing with over 200,000 teachers. And please keep doing that. We hope your organization is regenerative, and that you can continue to do that for your organization, and continue to do that for 100 years, we hope. But I also think that doing this in organizations as well, with the people who make the decisions, is just coming at it from the other side. And I think there is an opportunity with the pressure coming upward, particularly with the great transitions that are happening, people leaving companies for all sorts of reasons, and the ESG pressure coming down. I think there's a real opportunity right now to kind of get organizations on board with this. It's probably a more ripe environment than ever before, and we'll see what happens this year, if that goes kind of one way or another. But I think we have a good opportunity this year. One thing that we're doing, just to say before we get into the questions, at NLI, we've developed what we call a research briefing on this question, on regenerative practices. And we're delivering those to executive teams who want to understand the right and wrong ways to go about that. So if you're from an organization interested in a briefing, just put a regenerative briefing in the chat. Someone will follow up with you in the next little while. Just put regenerative briefing. We can come in and brief your leaders on those practices. Let's go back to you, Ryan and Jaimie. Any questions that you want to address in the chat coming up? What's coming up for you there?
Let's see. Somebody throw out a question. Let's see.
There's a couple in the Q&A as well.
Oh, how to reveal the schemas that we're working from. Curious how to address those inherent biases. That's a great one. So we've spent quite a lot of time actually unpacking mental models and schema that people use to drive their behavior. Sometimes we name them, we give them icons, and then we want to learn to recognize them in ourselves and others. And so you can start to ask yourself, well, what do people say? What are the kinds of things people say when they have that kind of mental model or that kind? And it's a lot of fun. And then you can just start naming them. That's the Titanic. It's an assumption of scarcity, or that's the bummer. It's not possible. Or I have to maximize gains for myself without realizing that self is nested inside the community and so forth. So you can begin to, and there's lots of literature out there on the ones that we've discovered already, but I would name them and then identify the opposites, and then use those brain-based strategies to figure out how to help people literally open their mind so they can see things that they couldn't see from the limited schema they were operating with.
Jaimie, what are the most common ones? I know that you've run a thing called the fish game for a long, long time, which kind of gives people a chance to interact with the system. What are the most common?
It's amazing. Amazing. 27 years, I get exactly the same mental models of unsustainability. Exactly the same. So the Titanic is one of them. So it's an assumption of we call it an assumption of scarcity. If you're on the Titanic, you might as well go first class. That's why we call it that. So people will hoard or take more than their share, or they are unable to think because they assume that there's not enough to go around. So they get while the getting's good. Another big one is that bummer. The kids call the people with the bummer the given ups. There's one that people that they don't think they have, but it's the anthropocentric, if you will. I know it's a lot of syllables, but they're very people oriented. And so in the fish game, we give people the carrying capacity and the replenishment rate, and they have all the data they need from nature to make it work. And they don't pay any attention to it. They just look at for what is he going to do? What's she going to do? They don't, nature is not even on their radar.
Right.
And so that's a big one.
Yeah, interesting. I know we're going to wrap up in a minute. Ryan, any closing comments as you see this framework? What's coming up for you as as a scientist and researcher? How optimistic are you that we can teach this to people and that we can make a difference to millions of people?
I'm incredibly optimistic. I mean, I think it's exactly the right time. People are ready for, I think, this sort of framework. I think they're open to it. And I think, building on the work Jaimie's been doing for such a long time as well, and having great success too. It's when you're hit with such a catastrophe as we've been in recently, like, I think, people are looking for some serious change that will actually make things better. And we'll do our best to make that happen.
Yeah,
thanks.
a regenerative principle is that disturbances create the next cycle of life.
No, that's nice. And I think, we've been talking for the last 2 summits about when a lot of change is going on, that's the time to do other big things. And so people are kind of open to big things right now. We should wrap up there. I know we've got a couple of announcements. Please stay with us for another 1 minute at least. We want to get a poll from you to sort of know how to support you and how to follow up. Jaimie, thanks so much for being a guest today, continuing this conversation. We look forward to continuing the collaboration and dialogue. And Ryan, thanks for your great insights and your hard work in the research team that I know we've been growing lately as well. We've been getting back to expanding our research team and hiring more broadly. So Jaimie and Ryan, feel free to jump off. I'm going to jump off. Thanks very much, everyone, for being here. And a couple of quick announcements, but please take care of yourselves, look after each other, and keep doing what matters. Back to you, Shelby. Bye-bye.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for today's discussion. It was super insightful. As David mentioned, please take a look and let us know how NLI can help you in the future. That poll will stay up for a few more moments. We also just want to thank you as always for attending today, staying engaged, sharing your thoughts and questions with us. If you are willing, we have a feedback survey that we'd love to have your feedback on. That link should be coming in. Insider exchange. So specifically for our senior executives, if you enjoy your Brain at Work Live and you think that you would be interested in this program, we invite you to join this community where you can get first looks at research, roundtable discussions with leading executives and researchers, and help us craft new innovations here at NLI. So to apply, that link will be available as well. And we are having a product demo next week. So if you are interested in Include, it will be next week on Wednesday, April 27th at 12 p.m. Eastern time. So keep an eye out for that. We're also hiring. If you're interested in joining our team and working with us, visit neuroleadership.com/careers to learn more about our open positions. And Summit 2023, as always, we're just going to keep reminding you, make sure that you have that on your radar. We're really excited for what's coming. For our podcast, if you enjoyed today's session and you'd like to listen back or share it with someone else, it will be available on our platform, Your Brain at Work, wherever you stream your podcasts from. And this is officially where we say farewell. So thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be back here same time next week, and have a wonderful weekend. We'll keep the chat open for a little bit so you can share, and have a wonderful Friday.